Think about the last time you said yes when every part of you meant no. Maybe it was agreeing to something that cost you time you didn't have. Maybe it was staying quiet in a room where something needed to be said. Maybe it was smiling at someone who had just diminished you, and then apologizing for making them uncomfortable. You did it automatically, without thinking, because somewhere along the way you learned that keeping the peace was more important than keeping yourself. And you've been called nice for it your entire life. Kind, easygoing, easy to be around. But there is something underneath that niceness that nobody talks about, something that has been growing quietly for years. And Carl Jung had a name for it. You were not born nice. You were trained to be. Think about the earliest moments you can remember being praised. Not for being honest. Not for saying what you actually thought. Not for wanting what you actually wanted. But for being agreeable. For not causing trouble. For making the adults around you comfortable. You learned very early that your authentic reactions, your anger, your refusals, your boundaries, your needs, made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people withdraw their love. So you made a trade. You traded the parts of yourself that were inconvenient for the safety of being liked. You learned to say yes when you meant no, to smile when you felt fury, to shrink when you wanted to take up space, to help when you wanted to be helped, and the world rewarded you for it. They called you the reliable one, the selfless one, the one who never complains, the one who always shows up. But here is what they never told you about that trade. Nothing you give away actually disappears. Your niceness isn't a virtue. It's a cage, and something inside it is getting very tired of the bars. The proof is in the moments you try not to think about. The flash of rage when someone takes your kindness for granted. Again, the exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much sleep you got. The quiet resentment you feel toward people you genuinely love. The fantasies you have about saying exactly what you think just once, without immediately taking it back. That is not ingratitude. That is not weakness. That is your shadow. And it has been waiting, with extraordinary patience, for you to finally look at it. Carl Jung believed that the human psyche is not one unified self. It is a collection of selves, some visible, some hidden, some actively suppressed. The self you show the world, composed, agreeable, selfless, nice, Jung called the persona, the mask. Not a deception exactly. More like a costume worn so long it begins to feel like skin. But behind every persona, Jung said, lives its opposite. The shadow. Everything the persona is not. Everything the persona had to exile in order to be acceptable. For a person whose persona is niceness, whose entire social identity is built around agreeableness, selflessness, and conflict avoidance. The shadow contains everything that niceness had to suppress to survive. The anger, the selfishness, the desire to be chosen first for once, the need to say no without explaining yourself, the hunger to take up space without apologizing for it. Jung was precise about this. The stronger the persona, the darker the shadow. The more relentlessly nice you are in public, the more controlled, the more agreeable, the more selfless, the more powerful and suppressed the opposite becomes in the dark. And suppressed things do not stay suppressed forever. Your shadow doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with a warning. It speaks in the language of symptoms, in the disproportionate anger you feel when someone cancels plans at the last minute. Not because the plans mattered that much, but because you said yes to them when you wanted to say no, and now you are furious at them for the choice you made. In the exhaustion that never fully lifts. Because performing niceness around the clock is one of the most energy-consuming things a human being can do. In the passive aggression you swore you would never use. The delayed responses, the subtle withdrawals, the things you don't say that somehow land louder than the things you do. In the relationships that slowly drain you. Not because the other person is terrible, but because you have never once told them what you actually need, and you have been quietly resenting them for not knowing. in the fantasy of disappearing, of starting over somewhere no one knows you, of being just once the person who doesn't show up, who doesn't answer, who puts themselves first without the crushing guilt that follows. Jung called this shadow leakage. The shadow cannot be permanently contained. However tightly you hold the cage, it finds the gaps. And what leaks through is always uglier than what would have come out if you had simply let it speak honestly in the first place. Here is what your niceness is actually costing you. It is costing you your relationships, not because people don't value you. They do. But they don't know you. They know the version of you that agrees, accommodates, shows up, and never complains. They have never met the version of you that has needs, that has limits, that wants things, that feels fury and grief and desire and exhaustion. And so the connection they feel with you, however real it seems, is a connection with your persona, not with you. It is costing you your energy, because saying yes when you mean no is one of the most physically expensive things a human body can do. Every suppressed no is stored somewhere in the nervous system, and the account has been running for years. It is costing you your authenticity. The more you perform niceness, the further you drift from your actual self, until one day you sit alone and genuinely cannot remember what you actually want, what you actually think, what you actually feel when nobody is watching. And it is costing you your power, not power over others, the only power that matters. The power to direct your own life according to your own truth rather than according to what keeps everyone else comfortable. Jung said it directly. To confront a person with their shadow is to show them their own light. If you know someone who gives everything and keeps nothing for themselves, send them this video. Not as a hint, as a gift. Carl Jung was not asking you to become cruel. He was not suggesting that honesty is an excuse for aggression or that having needs means abandoning care for others. He was saying something far more precise. The goal is not to destroy the persona. The goal is to integrate the shadow, to stop pretending the anger isn't there, and instead ask what it is trying to protect, to stop suppressing the need, and instead speak it simply without apology, to stop performing selflessness, and instead choose generosity freely from a place of genuine abundance rather than fear of withdrawal. The integrated shadow does not make you mean. It makes you real, and real people. People who know their own darkness and have chosen to be present anyway, are the most magnetic, most trustworthy, most genuinely kind people you will ever meet. Because their kindness is not a performance. It is not driven by fear of what happens if they stop being nice. It is a choice, made freely, every time. That is the difference between niceness and genuine goodness. Niceness is what you perform to stay safe. Goodness is what you offer when you are finally free. The next time you feel the impulse to say yes when you mean no, pause. Not to become difficult, not to punish anyone, but to ask yourself one honest question: whose comfort am I protecting right now? And what is it costing me? Jung spent his entire career arguing that the unlived life, the unexpressed self, the suppressed shadow, is the greatest source of psychological suffering available to a human being. Not the life that was hard, not the life that had loss. The life that was never fully lived because you were too busy making sure everyone else was comfortable. You are not put here to be easy to be around. You are put here to be real. And real begins the moment you stop mistaking your niceness for your goodness. And start asking what is living in the shadow of all that light you've been performing. If you're the kind of person who would rather face what's living in their shadow than spend another year performing niceness that's slowly draining them, you belong here. Subscribe and join us every Sunday. Think about the last time you said yes when you meant no. What were you actually afraid would happen if you had said no? Drop it in the comments. Just one thing. I read every single one. Next upload, we go somewhere even more uncomfortable. We're going to talk about the part of you that only loves what hurts, and why your nervous system keeps choosing pain over peace. If you think that doesn't apply to you, it probably applies to you most.